All right, let's jump right in. Today, we've got a really incredible story for you. It's about where trauma, technology, and, that very human need to create all just kind of smashed together. We're talking about an author who looked at his own life story, saw that it was just too broken to even tell, and decided, you know what? I'm going to build a machine to help me write it. I mean, think about that for a second. It's a question that, honestly, a lot of us might struggle with, right? When your past feels less like a story and more like just a jumble of painful, broken pieces, where do you even start? How do you possibly put all that back together into something that actually makes sense? Well, this is where our story takes a really unique turn. This author, faced with a memoir he just couldn't write, did something pretty incredible. He built his very own custom AI. He called it Lifebook, and its whole job was to take all of his journals, his therapy talks, all of it, and help him find the actual story that was buried underneath all that noise. So to really get why he felt he had to build this thing, we've got to go way back, way back. We need to understand how his entire view of the world was formed when he was just a kid. Yeah, it all started with a cat and a box. It's this memory that he calls a dark stain on his life. He was just a little boy, and he saw his older brother do something just casually, horribly cruel to a helpless animal. And in that one quiet moment, on a totally normal afternoon, something just snapped inside him. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. That single question became the basis for his entire life's operating system. You see, this wasn't just some sad memory he had. No. For his young mind, this was the piece of data he used to create a universal and absolutely terrifying rule about how the world works. So you can basically see the grim logic that his kid brain put together. Step 1, he sees this awful thing. Step 2, he decides, okay, that must mean everyone is secretly cruel. And step 3, well, the only logical conclusion is to build a fortress around yourself to survive. For a scared kid, it made a chaotic world feel predictable. It was a terrible lie, but it was a lie that helped him feel safe. Okay, so when your whole worldview is built on this terrifying idea, what do? Well, he didn't just hide. He started building safe havens, sanctuaries, where the rules actually made sense. And you can see the huge difference here. On one side, you've got his family home, total chaos, fear, rules that made no sense. But then, on the other side, he discovers the world of physics and code. And in that world, there's order, rules you can learn, there's safety. For the first time, things were predictable. And this quote, wow, it's so powerful. The equations were my liturgy. It shows you this wasn't just some school subject for him. Physics wasn't a hobby. It was like his religion. Every single equation that balanced was like a little prayer, a promise that even in a totally chaotic world, order could exist. It was literally a shield he built for himself out of pure logic. But logic wasn't the only place he hid. He also built another sanctuary, a much less stable one, right inside his own head. It's a coping mechanism called maladaptive daydreaming. Basically, he created these incredibly detailed, movie-like fantasies to escape into. And in those worlds, he felt seen. He felt connected. It was an escape he desperately needed. But the problem was, it was also a simulation that kept him completely cut off from real life. All right, so what happens when those escapes, those simulations in your head, just aren't cutting it anymore? Well, that's where we hit the turning point in his story. He realized he couldn't just keep escaping into new stories. He had to figure out a way to actually read the old one, the real one. And his motivation here was born out of pure, raw necessity. He tried using the commercial AIs that were out there, but they were useless. They were just designed to be agreeable, to flatter him, even when he knew he was losing touch. Then he had to take a break from therapy, and he was completely on his own. So he came to this really powerful realization. If the tool you need doesn't exist, well, you've just got to build it yourself. And the process he came up with, it's really elegant. It's a 3-step thing. First, his AI, Lifebook, would just ingest everything, all the raw, messy, chaotic journal entries and conversations. Then it would analyze all that data, not just for words, but for emotional patterns, for the links hiding between the lines. And finally, the last step, synthesize. It would weave all those fragments into a story that you could actually read and understand. He called it his digital mirror. And this is the really key part. It wasn't just a mirror that showed him his own words. No, this was a mirror designed to show him the hidden structure underneath it all, the hidden logic. He called it the source code of his own suffering. For the first time, he could see the why behind all the pain. So, what happens when you finally get to see the blueprint of your own mind? Well, this final part of the story is all about the massive impact this digital mirror had and how it changed everything. I mean, the change was just night and day. Before he built this AI, his pain was just a confusing fog. There were no shapes, no story, just suffering. But after Lifebook, it was like looking at a map. The pain was still there, sure, but now he could see where it came from. He could see the causes and effects, the direct lines connecting that moment with the cat to how he was acting as an adult. And that was the big one, the ultimate revelation. All of his symptoms, the anxiety, the daydreams, they weren't just random bugs in his system. They were his mind's desperate, clumsy attempts to tell a story that was too painful to say out loud. The story was there the whole time. He just needed a translator. And look, it is so important to understand this point. This is not a story about some magic AI that cures trauma. It didn't do that. The AI didn't just make the pain go away. It gave him something way more powerful, something more profound. It gave him clarity. It was like someone handed him a map of a battlefield he'd been fighting on his whole life, but in the dark. And with that map, he could finally start to find his way. So that kind of leaves us with this big, provocative question, doesn't it? We just saw how one person built a machine to help him finally read the story of his past. So the question for the rest of us is, if an AI can help us read our past, what kind of stories can we start writing for our future?